Hello, it's Reija and welcome to another video. Today I'm here to share with you my July reading wrap-up, and it was a pretty eclectic month for me. I read a bunch of manga and non-fiction and also some fantasy, so I think that in terms of genre diversity this was a very good reading month for me. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to talk about all the manga that I read first, starting with my reread of Berserk by Kentaro Miura. Earlier this summer, Kentaro Miura suddenly passed away, which brought Berserk back to the sort of focus on for me, because I have always loved that series, and a couple of years ago I started my reread of it, and then I got to the icky parts and I sort of left it, and now with Miura's passing I felt that okay, I am just gonna power through the Eclipse arc and continue on with my reread, because the series really gets good and the best parts are after the Eclipse, in my honest opinion. So I continued on starting with volume 11, which is the worst volume of Berserk. It is the absolute most atrocious volume of that series, and it's like it undermines the actual eclipse that is happening in the following volumes. It undermines that most crucial series expanding and basically the major conflict that the series is based around is the eclipse, and this volume introduces the worst possible antagonist. It undermines Casca's character, it sort of undermines Guts' character. There are a couple of decent conversations between like Judo and Griffith and the other like members of the Band of the Hawk, but other than that, this volume is just chock full of unnecessary violence and sexual assault. And I know this is Berserk we're talking about, like I shouldn't be surprised, but like this is the one volume where I am going to say that this volume is so unnecessary that every single adaptation that has ever been made of Berserk and this particular arc has just axed this volume completely, because it is that unnecessary and stupid. And it is gross, it doesn't amount to anything, and I would just basically skip it entirely if it wasn't for those maybe 2 or 3 conversations that we get between members of the Band of the Hawk. But other than that, it is just trash. It is garbage. Complete trash fire. And I feel like this is the volume that breaks most of the people that try to get into Berserk. Like, I feel like there are people who start Berserk and then volume 11 is the mark where some of them drop off. Kind of like in the YouTube video analytics, you have that drop-off point. I feel like 11 is that for a lot of readers, because this volume is such garbage. So I gave it 2 stars. I was being very generous. That 2 stars is mostly for the art, because Miura was a very talented artist, and Berserk has a very specific kind of art style. Moving on to Berserk volume 12 and volume 13, which are basically the Eclipse. Eclipse happens in those volumes. I won't elaborate further on that. Either you want to read Berserk and you don't want to be spoiled, or you have read Berserk and you know exactly what I am referring to. So yeah, I will leave it at that. Eclipse happens in these volumes. I was a complete wreck. This is probably the 4th time that I have experienced it in some way or form. content warnings for all manner of body horror, cosmic horror-esque things, and let's just say that Miura has a very vivid imagination when it comes to imagining awful things happening to people who don't deserve, in most cases, those awful things happening to them. I gave both of these volumes 5 stars. So you can imagine how frustrated I was that volume 11 was such an utter garbage fire and it is followed by some of the best work in the entire series. Like, mind-boggling. I just, like, in my head I keep imagining some sort of editorial shenanigans going on in the background. We need to have some sort of fight here because otherwise the children will get bored or something. Like, something must have happened because volume 11 was so under the par, and then volumes 12 and 13 so visually stunning, so much amazing character work, painful to read, some awful things happen, but also like this is the moment where I'm like, I can't wait to get to more of the volumes, and I have like 4 volumes waiting for me right now that I have picked up from the library. So now I'm pumped about Berserk again. So yeah, really enjoying my foray back into the world of Berserk. And then I read Delicious in Dungeon Volume 9 by Ryoko Kui. I gave this one 5 stars as well. An excellent volume. We got some more lore about the dungeons and how they have come to exist, and about the different races and how they politically operate with each other. And yeah, this volume was just so much fun. Like, Ryoko Kui is such a master. Like, the humor is on point. Like, she is constantly reinventing all of these different kinds of magical creatures and coming up with her own spin on them, and her sense of humor is just so ridiculous and delightful. And also she manages to mix some really gruesome and kind of scary imagery in her world building that you don't expect. And this is one of the best fantasy series that I have read, manga or otherwise. It is just so good, and I really need people to read it because I want to gush about it with everyone. It is such a fantastic series. It only keeps getting better, and yeah, I can't wait to see how it ends at some point. I feel like this series would probably be good as a sort of like 20 volume series. I can't imagine it going further than that, though to be fair, I think there are a lot of things yet that we haven't been told. But I'm imagining like the sweet spot being at 20 volumes, but we shall see. We shall see how it continues. And then I read some non-fiction, starting with Conflict is Not Abuse by Sarah Schulman. This was the first book for Jess Owens's book community read book club, and there's going to be a live show about this book on August 14th, and I am actually going to be a guest host on that live show, so I will leave all the beats down in the description. And I am also not going to go full depth about my thoughts on this book because I will be sharing them in the live show. But I wasn't the biggest fan of this book. Like, this book is basically about people often misinterpreting and almost willfully overstating harm when what they are experiencing is conflict or argumentations instead of like being abused or people having power over them, and the lack of distinction people have between these two, especially nowadays in our modern time and with social media, etc. Like basically the people are being too sensitive argument, etc. So I thought that it was an interesting premise because I've definitely seen some of this happening where people sometimes blow things way out of proportion and also sometimes willfully misrepresent things in order to make them look less abusive. So it's kind of like a spectrum of things. And Sarah Schulman had some interesting thoughts, but I feel like she often missed the mark by inserting her own personal opinions into the mix instead of focusing more on like statistics and analysis of the ideas she was discussing. When she inserted her own self into the narrative, she comes across a bit holier than thou, and that can be incredibly annoying. And she also presents herself as being always on the right. She will never allow for a personal anecdote where she comes across as the where she doesn't come across as the so-called victor. So yeah, I gave this book 2.5 stars. It was interesting. There were some good points that she made, but overall I wasn't too keen on it. And I hope you will check out the live stream next Saturday and see what all of us think. There's going to be Jess Owens, Mara from Books Like Whoa, Angela from Literature Science Alliance, and myself. So hope to see you there. And then another non-fiction that I read in the month of July was Disfigured on Fairy Tales, Disability and Making Space by Amanda Leduc. And this one I gave 4 stars to. I listened to it on audio and I really enjoyed it. It basically looks at the evolution of fairy tales and how disfigurement has been used to denote flaws in character and villainy, etc. And it kind of makes the argument that when we are exposed to these kind of depictions of this disfigurement and disability, we are then more likely to have certain internalized biases against actual disabled and disfigured people. And I thought that this was a very interesting and well put together book that not only utilizes statistics and studies, but also interviews with disability and disfigurement activists, and it was very well put together. I will say that sometimes I got a bit confused when Amanda Leduc would reference an interview she had done where I kind of missed the point where I was supposed to get that the reference was of an interview and not Amanda Leduc's own thoughts. So that could have been made clearer. And another thing was that she talks a lot about congenital disfigurement and disability, and doesn't really broach the topic of disability as or ability as something that can change. For example, I myself am someone who like has a congenital syndrome, but my level of ability hasn't really been like an issue until I reached, let's say, my late 20s. Like the change in ability is something that I have had to struggle with over the years. So I would have liked to have some more of that as well, so that it covered the whole range of what disability can look like. But other than that, I really enjoyed this book and I gave it 4 stars. It was a really it was a really intelligent and empathic reading experience, and I would highly recommend that everyone read it. It was very good. And then the final book that I read in the month of July was Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb, the final book in the Lifeship Traders trilogy. And I have to say that in my opinion, while this book does complete the trilogy in a satisfactory manner, we get a lot of answers to the questions that were raised in the previous two iterations to this trilogy. I still think this is the weakest one. There are like this, I don't know, I just feel like this like has a different tone to the first two. This goes more towards that adventure mode, whereas the first two were more like political and introspective and sort of tense, and this one is more like high seas adventure. Like, I feel like this is the tone what people are talking about when they advertise this this trilogy, and it is only in the last volume that we get this. Like, this is the high seas sort of Pirates of the Caribbean-esque adventure. There are still a lot of tense moments, but I still feel like this is like the first two, people are mulling over and considering and reflecting on all the awful shit that is happening to them. In this book, awful shit is happening to people, but there is not as much reflection as in the other two. I think that's what I mean when I say that it is very different. I still liked it, but it was a harder reading experience than the first two, for sure. And there is a sexual assault scene in this book that I feel like didn't need to be there. I feel like that scene was there to push forward momentum on all the other characters except the one person that the sexual assault actually happens to, which is something that I really dislike. Like, if you're going to sexually assault a character in a book, the person who should, you know, be the focus of the thing and the aftermath should be the person who that thing happened to, you know, like, and it was also like 4 pages long. Like, I'm just saying that I do not need a 4-page full description of an assault. And here's the thing, I don't consider myself to be like squeamish or anything, but I just feel like, I just was like feeling that like, okay, this was unnecessary. Like, that was my feeling of that scene. Like, I was just like knitting my brows together and feeling like, oh, like, this is atrocious. No, I don't want this. And I just kept wondering what was achieved with this, you know? So that sort of soured me to this book, and it happens around somewhere around here, so it's towards the end of the book. But yeah, I gave this one 4 stars, which is quite a bit lower than the rest of the books in the series, so yeah, think of that what you will. I still really enjoyed the Lifeship Traders trilogy as a whole, but I feel like I am going to be, like, of the books in the trilogy, the Mad Ship is the standout for me, for sure. And there you have it. Those have been all of the books that I read in the month of July. Tell me in the comments, have you read any of these books, or are you interested in any of them? And leave me a flower emoji down in the comments so that I know that you were here, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye bye!